running a OneNote Hack Day, a webinar presented by the OneNote Watercooler community. And today we're interviewing Ian Stewart from Glow, Scotland's national online environment for learning. So welcome everyone to our third OneNote Watercooler webinar. We have had a couple of attempts at sharing a few bits of information, and we've got a lot of educators on that enjoyed the content. So today we're looking at how to run a OneNote Hack Day, and we're talking with Ian Stewart. So there's a couple of things I just want to introduce to you to start with before we get into the meeting itself. Today we have a shared meeting experience, not just through the link experience, but I have shared, as you can see on screen, a OneNote section in our OneNote Watercooler area. So this is a OneNote page that you'll be able to join, and if you join using this bit.ly link here, and I'll paste this into, oh yep, thank you very much, Calvin. Cal's pasted it into the instant messaging window. If you launch that, then you'll be able to open up this page in your browser, and you will see the newer experience of OneNote Online, where the Edit in Browser button is over to the right. If you click that, then I'll welcome you to start up a page like this, and Mr. Webster will do. And you can begin to make some notes of things that you might pick up from the talk, and everyone will be able to benefit from that. So do welcome you to do that. So yeah, we'll be interviewing Ian, and just as some way of introduction, and I will leave Ian to talk a little about himself too, but the great thing is that I bumped into Ian via Twitterverse. I somehow landed in a massive discussion with Glow Scott and all the teachers that jump in and are doing this for personal development, and made the connection that way. Ian's helping to run Glow Scott, the Scottish e-environment for education, and he's definitely very much into OneNote. So welcome, Ian. What I will do is ask you to switch your screen over so that you'll be presenting your desktop, and yes, we'll give you control.
Thank you, Darryl. Yes, I am massively into OneNote, and have been for about 10 years. Once my screen starts sharing,
I think what you did was you requested control for my screen. So
okay,
yep,
release control.
That's the one. Find the that's the one. Find the shared desktop button.
As you can tell, I am an expert in this stuff. And actually, what I would like to do is introduce the fact that none of us are experts in this stuff. Possibly Mike. I'll let Mike off with this one. But none of us are experts, and we're kind of creating our own way. And what I want today to be is about your voice as much as mine. I'm going to tell you about what I've been doing and what we've been creating and how we've been working together. But actually, what I want to do is get you actually involved in this process as much as possible. So, a bit of background. This is the system that allows us to authenticate into internet. So, we have Office 365 globally. Now, my background is I am living at the moment in my school is actually these two out here. We have Isla and Jura. So we have a small number of pupils, but pupils travel a great distance to get to the school, which is the rather famously named Bowmore. And the distillery is about 200 metres away from the school. So if you look at a bottle of Bowmore whiskey, turn it back, you'll see it's on School Street, and we're at the end of School Street. So we have lots of pupils who travel great distances. And that caused us to reflect on how we were learning and teaching. This was about 10 years ago. And we went on a one-to-one route. And at that point, when I was doing my investigation, I discovered OneNote. And it drove us to make lots of changes. every teacher now has a tablet PC. Every pupil has a touchscreen or tablet PC. We use OneNote as our interactive whiteboard software. I know that discussion has gone elsewhere around this. And we put in wireless projectors. Recently, they've just moved, and I can no longer say we, which is a wee bit heartbreaking for me, but they have just moved to Webcast as their teaching device. So every pupil walks into a classroom, the wall's painted white. In my case, the short, fat, baldy man doesn't get in the way of the projection, which I think is a really important aspect of it. And it means I can work with the kids right beside them, sitting beside them, rather than broadcasting to them. So OneNote became our foundation stone for learning and teaching. And as we moved on through the years, we gained more and more ideas around this and how we would work together, how we would work with classes, collect evidence for work. Pupils, because of the geographical nature of where we were, we couldn't assume we had internet connection at home. So we made sure that all video, audio, materials were available via OneNote to sync to those devices. The pupils would do their work, come back in, and it would sync back in. This became a very, very powerful workflow for us. And very cost effective as well, much cheaper than interactive whiteboards in a classroom. So we could have every kid with a tablet, teacher with a tablet, a broadcast device, which would be in my case, it would be a projector. But that was it. The wall was painted white. The total cost of that was slightly less than the cost of installing an interactive whiteboard. The total cost. Plus we saved about £60,000 over our first 3 years of on paper printing and photocopying, which paid for our sustainability of our devices. Recently, I've been working on OneNote and actually really thinking, how can we use this in Scotland? So I've been seconded to the Scottish Government to lead the developments on our Glow platform, basically because of what we did in Islay. So I said, why are we replicating lots of stuff? Why are we taking stuff and repeating it in paper and then replicating that electronically? Why are we not building straight in? While I was on Islay, I created OneNote textbook. This is Oriental languages. And I used resources from a friend of mine who runs Radiolingua, and it's a language school. So actually, we took his stuff and we built the text with audio built into it. This was for 2 pupils specifically who wanted to go and study Oriental languages in Edinburgh University, but strangely enough, on a geographical space, we had nobody who could actually teach them that directly. So they did this. They took it away, they learned the stuff themselves, they came in, and what I didn't tell them at the end was they would be speaking to a Japanese and a Mandarin speaker at the end of the course to make sure they were comfortable, and make sure Oriental languages that they were wanting to study at university was actually what they wanted to do. Interestingly, one of them dropped Oriental languages as a desired course, the other one has gone on to study Oriental languages and has continued, which I thought was a really positive message for both of them. So, the question I now have is, how can we work globally to do this? Now, a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago I think it was, 21 teachers in Scotland got together on a Saturday in Microsoft's headquarters here in Edinburgh, and we spent the day exploring what we could do and how we could work together to create resources. In Scotland, we have a new exam system, which has been in place about 2 years maximum. There's a phasing in process. And lots of subjects have no textbooks. So each school is having to create their own working area within what they were doing. So they were all working individually in their schools. And we discovered that they're repeating themselves all across the country. So the idea became, well, let's split the workload and share it. We threw into that the mix into PowerPoint with screen recording, and actually realised we had a system which could build multimedia textbooks and then distribute them fairly easily. So the question then became about copyright, who owned the stuff, and we went for a Creative Commons with a non-commercial attribute. And the idea is, the phrase we've used is, the work is owned by the community, and we've defined the community as being anyone who's contributed to the work. So even if you're a teacher, if you haven't contributed, you're still not part of that community. It's only once you've contributed do you become part of the community. And that's who own it. It doesn't get owned by the Scottish Government or become owned by any school or any individual. It's owned by the community. And I think that's a really important aspect of all this. So what I'd like to do is, one, finish off what we're doing in Scotland, working with teachers, working with individuals, by distance, coming together on Hackdays, but also work with each other globally to see how we can support each other globally. Now, that's the overview. That's the very quick overview of what we're trying to do. The question then becomes, for me, is where do we put stuff? How do we identify what we're going to do? How do we share what we're going to do? Now, there's fairly obvious answers to that in terms of we all have access to these resources in terms of OneNote personal. But it becomes, how do we actually create a backlog of resources that we identify what we need to do? Another question I have is, do we build complete textbooks, or do we build resources that are separate from the textbooks, and then teachers can choose which resources go into the textbooks when and where they require? So, Darryl, what do you think? Is that a good overview as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, just definitely a flyover of what you've how you got to the point that you're at with Glow and with textbooks. I guess if we just take it back in a sense to ground zero too, some people might not know what a hack day is. So the aim, I guess, you're trying to encourage schools to get together and create a whole lot of resources that will fit the curriculum. Can you just let us know what your understanding of a hack day is?
Sure. What I was trying to do with a hack day was to get teachers to hack resources, build resources collaboratively, take what they already have to change and convert, to make available for others. So the hack day, and I think it was really important to come together as much as possible, because people want to share with people they know. So if they've met other people, it means that they're more willing to share with those people and work collaboratively with them, because they can hear their voice. They know where they're coming from. They understand the person a bit more than they would do if it's just purely by text and email. So the Hack Day idea came just out of the Twitter sphere. Message went out and said, who's up for spending a Saturday? The Scottish Government will pay for your lunch if you come in and help us work. And that's all Scottish Government paid for was lunch. And it was, again, that was deliberate, just so that it was disassociated from any structures that were already existing. And I think that became a really important aspect. That I was really pleased that the engineering science, I'm an engineering scientist, I'm an engineer to background, and I was really delighted that my particular community took this up massively. So we had 6 engineers who were looking at the engineering science for Scottish education, and they took this on massively. There was geographers, there was media studies teachers, English teachers. There was no maths teachers, interestingly enough, because I see somebody's mentioned maths. But I've had so much interest since then of lots of people saying, actually, we want to do more of these.
Do you see
so
Marilyn's
I think that's
question
really
there?
interesting.
You see Marilyn's question there? Does a hack day have a goal to produce an end product, or by the end of the day, or was it just brainstorm?
That very first one was a brainstorm, very much a brainstorm, but what it did produce at the end of the day was a list of things that had to be done, a list of tasks. So people went away, so we had a structure in place, and what was interesting is that everybody agreed that the very first section of any OneNote we produce will be a OneNote how to use OneNote section.
Right.
For lots of people, and that would be embedded first, and then we'd have each of the units of work for each subject. So all the textbooks were actually the same structure. We then had a OneNote with lots of things. We need a video for this. We need a screen capture of this instruction. We need lots of this. So it becomes much more like a backlog in an IT development system with lots of stuff on the Trello board to actually start to work on. Now, in Scotland, there's tons of work being done right now for exams. Teachers are extremely busy. I'm not expecting us to start moving on again until after the Easter holidays. And that's when the next push will come.
Yeah, there's definitely peaks and troughs of how much time can be invested in creating resources. I guess it's my hope that we help to get teachers, educators everywhere to see that creating a resource in OneNote is just as easy, if not easier, than creating it in Word or in PowerPoint, so that the tools that they might already be using, they begin to start creating these resources within OneNote itself. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. I mean, the other part to this, of course, is the ability now to actually do a screen recording, get to Office Mix, and then export the video of what you're going to do. Lots of teachers have introductory parts on PowerPoint to each bit of the lessons. So it's actually an evolutionary step for them to do a slide recording and a screen recording together to produce a video. They no longer have the huge transfer from one to the other. This is an excellent stepping stone into one.
Right. So, around that point, so they're creating a screen recording to introduce the unit of work. That would be quite a good introduction to the whole unit that you might be creating as a flipped classroom experience within OneNote. You link out to that video that's sitting somewhere in the video service of sorts.
Yep. Now, the other part of using OneNote, the part of the materials being embedded into OneNote becomes a really important aspect of this. We can create videos and put them on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever else, or Office 365 video, and say, watch this. But the advantage of actually having it embedded into the OneNote so it moves onto the mobile device of the individual, the pupil, is really interesting. As part of my present job, I've done some research into who's got access to devices. And one of the really interesting things is that the highest socioeconomic groupings in Scotland have less access than the lowest socioeconomic groups to devices, individual devices. That's because parents want to do screen time controls and all those kind of things. Lower socioeconomic students have access to devices, but what they don't have is access to bandwidth and data. So if they lose their data charges, don't forget to top up their phone, don't have the money to do it, all those things. The device is still there, and if they've got downloaded it onto the device, they still have access to every video, every audio, every file is on their device already. This to me is the foundation for BYOD, bring your own device, which we're looking at heavily in Scotland. And I'm sure, I know that everywhere in the world is looking at this, but having the resources that you want to learn from available on demand, not just through a connection, which you may not have, but actually being able to watch a video on the way into school on a device, even though you've not got your data paid up, or your internet's down, or the electricity's off, or whatever. I know there's lots of socioeconomic things in the background there, or because you live on an island 2 hours off the mainland and you don't have an internet connection, that you've still got access to the resources.
One thing in that thinking, if sort of bringing it back to the Hackday scenario, so from what I gather, it's quite important in various areas of Scotland where if it's lower socioeconomic or maybe just that you don't have a very good internet connection, that the videos that you create are actually part of an offline copy of OneNote. So I think this is where when you are creating your work within a Hackday, as a focus group of teachers that are trying to reach a common goal, they might be teaching the same subject in the same year, that they create these resources, and perhaps as a unit of work, and this is just my suggestion, but each unit of work that covers your curriculum can be a section in that notebook. And this means that at the end of it, you'd be able to export the whole section and have that sitting somewhere where a teacher can grab that and attach it to the work that they'll be covering within the year. Having them as separate files would certainly look after your scenario where that individual section file will have the media file embedded or saved in within it. And having it separate in a section would mean that you don't have to download one large notebook necessarily, but you can just add it in as required.
Absolutely, and what I want to create is a foundation that a teacher can take and then build other things. They will choose it, they will vary it according to what their kids need. Add bits, take bits out. I can imagine English teachers having a range of sections they can choose from for different books they're looking at. But in their class is looking at one particular book. Say they were looking at Catcher in the Rye. You can have a section with video, audio, working at Catcher in the Rye, as you would do with a section in a textbook. But actually, you're not looking at Catcher in the Rye that year. You're looking at 1984. So you would switch out the Catcher in the Rye section and put in the 1984 section for your individual. So it becomes more flexible. Maths, I think, could benefit. The work of Kurt in Austria is just fantastic. Looking at how you use maths with a stylus, record the screens. Now, we asked we used to give pupils the choice of 20 equations, and they would fill in 6 of them and drop the videos back in. So we would screen record what they were doing with the equations, telling the teacher where they misunderstood, where the mistakes were, and the teacher would actually listen to that back. So if you've got a core one of OneNote sections, and then you have a section that the pupils drop their videos into, the teacher can then give formative feedback. So you're built up from a textbook scenario to a multimedia scenario to an interactive scenario. And I think you need all three of those.
So, as far as making that work in terms of a hack day, I can see that working quite well. A class decides to cover one book this year, and the next book, a completely different book the following year. If 2 or 3 teachers want to co-author and create the questions and the lessons and activities that a student can step through on their own and save it as a separate section, then as you say, you can select to grab that section and say we're covering it for this year. And I think that's one really good thing about the Hack Day is that it's one event to start with, but it's also inspiring people and igniting something to say let's start to create some bones and some structure, and we can fill that out later on if we need to.
And the other part of the Hack Day is to build a community. So you're building a structure, but you're also building people who are working together. You're building a community who have a common goal. And actually, because they've spoken to each other, spent time together, understand the whole process, or maybe not the whole process, but understand the starts of the process, they're much more willing to engage and talk about things than they would do if they just picked up on things and went, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, but I'm not sure how I'd fit into this social interaction. So the Hack Day, as well as giving a structure very quickly, also gives a community structure very quickly, and I think that's almost as important. I think at the end of the day, you've got a core of people who are willing to work with each other and listen to each other and support each other.
How do you feel about drawing that? I mean, I've just grabbing your stylus and trying to illustrate how that looks.
Okay. So, there we go. On the day, you have, well, actually ahead of the day, so prior to starting, you have some ideas, just go ideas, and you put out some problems, and people start to connect in. So people start asking, putting answers in. And actually, you then start saying, well, how about we set a fixed date in place, date and time, and we'll get together. And we'll set a target on that day, and that target will be to get a structure in place very quickly. Now, I was over ambitious on the very first one. I was hoping we would get 3 or 4 resources out of it. What we got out of it was the structure, the actual structure of the day. We said Scottish education, particularly senior level, we have 3 units on every page. Let me just pick this up. So we have 3 units. Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3. So what we got was a structure to the OneNote. And we said that's the basic structure. So we know that every subject has 3 units, because that's the heartbeat of Scottish education. And I know that's very Scottish. And to actually have that structure in place, we actually said in the very first one, and everybody said this, let me just rub that out. The very first one, everybody said, actually, you know what, we need a kind of core unit in here, and it's a how-to. And I think that becomes a really important aspect to it as well, because we're actually supporting the use of OneNote as well as producing the resources. So it's that growing the community part again. I think that's it. So as well as that structure, physical structure, we've actually got community.
Yep, this is important to focus on because aside from having the Hack Day event, it does form other connections. People, have seen each other face to face if they haven't already, and you begin to focus on filling out more sections and more content for the curriculum. I think aside of the education example, Marilyn runs a OneNote community notebook for all things OneNote and tips. And the idea is that some of those people who've been invited to participate can continue to fill out this living document. So this is the same concept, that when we're creating resources for our curriculum in Hack Days, it doesn't stop there at the Hack Day. The notebook ideally sits somewhere where everyone can still connect to and begin to fill out that content. And that's why community is definitely important.
Absolutely, and a clear understanding of working together. So it was very interesting. We had 2 media studies teachers who created a very simple area. But what they did, those 2 individuals went away and they just connected and brought other people in. That made a much wider connectivity. So those 2 became the advocates and saying, this is a good idea. We need to spread the workloads and help each other. This is how we do it. And they would show to people and they go, yes, that means that I'm creating a small part of a workbook. I'm not having to create an entire course, and I'm doing it in an interesting way using media. And at media studies, it fits in perfectly because they can then take clips and start building text, as we would call it in media, and say, let's look at train spotting. What are the themes in train spotting? Let's look at these, because it's a very Scottish film, but in a very Scottish book, and actually look at the 2 idioms, how they've changed, the media has affected those. And they work very, very closely, at least virtually, in mindset in the community, even if they're not connected to each other in the same area or the same schools. And that's the other part that's been interesting. The people who have bought into this generally have been in spread out areas. They have not been the central areas of Scotland. They have not been in big cities out of Edinburgh and Glasgow. They have been the isolated people who recognise that they need to work collaboratively and not wait for anybody else, but just get on with it. And I think that's a really interesting part, coming from where I do, where literally you have a 2.5-hour ferry journey to get to the mainland, and then another 2 hours before you get to the nearest town, big town. I think building and working together is a bigger driver in those geographically spread areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a starting point, you've created a notebook. You've started to spark that interest as a Hack Day, and I really like how you drew that the word spread and other people from other areas begin to jump on board. Where does the notebook sit where people can continue to work? Is it sitting somewhere on in the Glow environment, or is it sitting in like just OneDrive? Whereabouts is the notebook located?
The stuff we've been working on has just been within the Glow environment, so within our own Office 365 tenancy. And I created a site within Office 365, and we built a group and we tried different things to see what would work and what wouldn't work, but it was all within the tenancy. I think if we were to do this and spread this globally, which I think is possible, I think it would just take a OneDrive somewhere just to host it and allow people to start building stuff. Doesn't matter whether it's a site or just a OneDrive folder that started to share out. I really don't think that's too much of an issue. It becomes more about the workflow then. And it's about standards of what standard of video do we put in, what standard of audio do we put in, if we want to get the maximum number of people. And I spoke to Mike at Betts in London a few weeks ago, and because if I put WMV file, I know I'm not going to get access to Macintosh, and it's building those kind of standards that we need to work to. And I'm a huge fan of standards. I think standards are vitally important in understanding how technically things go together. So we've got the cultural, we've got the technical, and we've got the will, and the three things together mean that we're going to build something really interesting and really positive for all of us.
Yeah, there is certainly some things to work out, and I know it's early stages in the way that Glow is approaching it. I do remember seeing, and I think it was even in this conversation window here, that Mike Fulton said Greece have already approached turning their curriculum into a OneNote format. So there are some other countries, other organisations and schools that are beginning or have already done this process. It'd be really good to learn from them what approach they took. That's good. So Microsoft are putting together a case study, as Mike's just messaged there. So that'd be good to
excellent.
read through. Yeah. So we can marry some of those principles up that we learned from the case study to perhaps improve on the Hackday experience. I'll just buzz through my questions and see if we've covered most of the things off. I know that we're only looking to run it for half an hour, but certainly if you've got questions, people who are attending, do drop them into the window, and I'll just see if there was anything else I wanted to ask. I mean, really, one key thing is sort of come out, during this conversation that community is important. That it's important to have a day in person where you are sitting down with people and you can make that connection. But
the other part of that is we had 21 people in the room, but we have had another 40 since then who weren't in the room, but have been brought in by the others who were in the room. So that the people in the room can become evangelists and go out and say, we need to do this. We need to go and this needs to be done, and we need to. This is going to help us share our workload. And you need those people to go out and do that. And that's what the people who were there on the day, that's what they've been going out and doing.
So that's why it's even more important. One of the first steps is deciding or making sure that you put your notebook somewhere where it will live and continue to live, so that you can point additional people who catch the idea, the fire starts to light and it spreads, that people can continue to go back to that same place and be part of the experience.
The question I have for people is, creating a OneNote in a space is very excellent. How do you actually work with others? I mean, this is a fantastic, and thanks for doing this, Daryl, using Link to talk to each other and share ideas. But how do you get that conversation going? And do you create a blog or a wiki or an Office 365 site? Do you use Yammer? Do you use everything that's going? And that's the other question, which I'm not quite clear in my head. I just tend to use whatever's near at hand.
Yeah, you do.
But there's no right or wrong answer to any of this.
No, there isn't. And if we come back to your point about standards, it's part of what also needs to be agreed upon. Because if you choose too many methods of communication, then you end up spreading the community in a sense across too many things. So certainly Twitter is one way to get people involved, and I know it limits people to the 200 characters or 140 characters, whatever it is, I forget these days. But it's also got to be a platform or communication platform that it's easy for people to connect to and reasonably familiar. So Kevin is just mentioned that IM Window, they use Yammer. One way, of course, too, is creating a community page on Facebook or something like that. But you need, I would say, two levels of communication. One that you can just post in a forum sense and people can read and pick up on things and respond. And then having something like this where the group occasionally gets together virtually in a virtual meeting of sorts, whether it be Skype or Link or whatever, and just have a chat and a sort of touch base about, okay, well, how far have you got on with creating that resource, and is there anything that we need to talk about or agree upon or discuss?
I think the agreeing upon is a way forward is very important. I mean, I've done this. I'm not saying what I've done is absolutely correct, and I'm making a call to all of you. Please throw ideas. Whenever you throw them, just don't throw them very hard, but throw ideas and say, have you thought about this? Because I probably haven't. Nobody does. Nobody thinks of everything, and that's the co-created becomes really important, and that you need to listen. And I like to think of a good listener as well as a good talker, because it's really important we listen to all opinions and then say, actually, we need to think about this. This is really important. And the standards part, we need to agree on standards. We need to fairly rigorously stick to those standards, otherwise we get splintering. Again, I'm not hugely a problem with splintering, unless you want to reuse stuff. If you want to go off on a different tack with your stuff, I don't see a problem with that. It's when you try to share it with others. But if you're not sharing it with others, you're not really buying into the whole thing properly, I don't think.
Yeah. It was a conversation I had quite early on with Mike Folson and Ari Shaw about the concept of this. Not so much Hackdays, but how do you get teachers to share OneNote resources that they have created with the wider community? And we did take a fresh look at the Partners in Learning site, and I understand there's still some things that are happening there, that some changes. But some way that we can point all teachers from around the world, or even leverage an existing community to say, we're going to start creating curriculum resources, and here's how you can connect. And I think that's one thing that we'd welcome the direction from Microsoft, or perhaps some way of reusing some of the communities or resources that already exist. But certainly,
just to say, I mean, that's actually part of the ethos of a hack day, is to take what's already there and use it for your purpose. Just if it's already there, why not use it?
Exactly. I think we've covered a lot of things off, but it is an ongoing discussion. It might be a good thing to check in a couple of months' time and see how your journey has continued to be with Glow, Scott, and maybe by then we might have been able to run something similar on different scales. Now, one thing that I hoped to get out of this meeting too, and this webinar, was to show that it doesn't just have to happen on just one scale. So you can run your own little hack day with your group of teachers from your own department or your own primary school syndicate. Sit down and start to work through a notebook and the curriculum that you're trying to cover, address the subjects, and begin to put something of a structure in there. And I'm sure this can happen quite easily in a school on its own. But going wider than that, being able to perhaps get together with other teachers from other schools that ones that you cooperate with, sister schools, and definitely getting people in together to focus on the same subject. One thing I remember we talked about, Ian, before, looking at running this webinar, the way of being able to leverage your own existing professional networks, trying to spark up the idea with some of the teachers that you're already familiar with and in contact with, and pulling them into, let's focus on an area of science and try and create that. That's definitely important to get the focus going and start to create those resources.
That's the important part. It's the focus. Now, we've concentrated on subjects, very much on subjects, and But then actually you could work around topics. Several of my colleagues in primary school, including my wife, so I have to listen very carefully, have been asking, how do we do this in a primary setting rather than a secondary subject-based? And actually the idea of building it around a project, renewable energy, and it's pulling the resources so that there's a resource already created that people can again add to, be it web links, be it PowerPoints, be it video, be it audio, all together that they can then pull in and use for their purposes. I'm coming more and more to the idea that actually it might be quite a good way of working together as well at that level, at primary level. So it becomes not just a subject-based maths, geography, physics. It becomes much more a topic-based. Vikings, renewable energy, all those kind of things, and you bring all the areas around that, so you can easily flip it to be that as well.
Yeah, no, I had an interesting conversation with a cluster of schools this week. I had assumed that with a primary school, it might be quite a simple structure. They might just want to work together in the teams that they're in. So years 1 and 2, maybe they want to work together and that's their team, and then they create their resources. But this cluster of school surprised me. They almost went in the same direction you're talking about, where with high schools, we have subject, or topic. They wanted to create a site structure, and I'm suggesting that they could also create a OneNote structure where you have a topic, whether it be literacy or mathematics, and they cover things off in levels 1, 2, 3, right through to 6, I think, in our primary schools here in New Zealand. They're going to create pockets of resources, lessons that are going to cover this, and whether this be a site structure or a notebook structure, they have the class notebook sitting over here, and a teacher says, right, for this week, I want Group A. You're going to be covering, and I'll create a link here to literacy level 1. I want Group A to cover that, and you'll also go to level 2 in maths. And they just reference those resources across in this primary site structure. Now, as you look at that, I see quite a familiar structure there that you might set up in a high school. The English department and years 9, 10, 11, 12. So they still want to follow that structure, and I think it works quite well in that you can create those pockets of resources and continue to add to them, continue to use them year after year, and just spruce them up and update them as needed.
Absolutely, and I think it's the fact they've got a structure, I think, becomes the important part. Not what the structure contains, but the structure, as long as everybody understands what the structure's getting across and how they use that, that's the important part.
So I guess we're a little over time. That's okay. But like I said, I suggest that we do check back in a few months' time and see how things are going. This is very much a user group styled meeting. It's not just presentation. We ask questions. We challenge each other. We are communicating a lot within our OneNote Watercooler network. Let me just bring up the.
And if anybody's not in there, get in there very quickly. I think it's one of the best focus communities I've come across.
Yeah, definitely. Let me just type that up on the page. So those of us. So it's yammer.com/OneNote Watercooler.
Calvin's in there ahead of you again.
I would copy and paste that, but that was right there. Excellent. And this is a perfect example of a community chipping in and helping out, because Daryl likes to pretend to multitask, but really he might
doesn't exist. Nobody can.
I can drive a manual. That's multitasking, isn't it? Pushing the clutch and changing gears at the same time as watching the road.
That's just driving in the UK.
Yeah, that's one task. Oh, that's good. Hey, so thank you very much, Ian, for taking this part of your day out to join us and give us a clue as to how you got started with Glow and Hackdays. I know there's a lot of ideas that we splurted out there throughout the webinar, and we could probably get that into some kind of structure, but hopefully this has inspired those who have been able to watch the webinar and those who will watch later on video. This is an ongoing story. We're looking forward to seeing the case study.
Very much ongoing.
Yeah, that case study from Microsoft about how Greece did it. I'm really looking forward to that.
Here.
And hopefully we can start to form some kind of best practice as we try things out and say, oh, that worked well, that one didn't. And I guess one little fire I would like to light, and again, this was discussed on Twitterverse, how about we run some great big global 24-hour hack day across all the countries of the world? I know it would take a lot of organising, but
I'd be up for helping to organise that as well. I think that'd be a fantastic event. Although I was thinking about it, to take 24 hours across the world takes 48 hours.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Maybe
which kind of relieved me a bit.
Yeah, an absolute 24 hours in the sense that being New Zealand and where we are, we get to see the day first, and we're ahead of you in time. That we might start it from here, and then people work 8 hours at a location or different locations. And
almost past the baton. Yeah, I like that.
Past the baton. Yep. I'm hoping maybe to have some kind of central place where it's a bit like joining a central meeting throughout the whole day, and people can just join from wherever they are, and we can present what people have come up with and talk about it. And then throughout the day, perhaps run little tip sessions to show how to use OneNote and how to create resources. We can get some of the OneNote Avengers or champions to come in and give us their tips about how to use OneNote to make a very cool looking
fantastic. And just to answer the question, I would say all learners, teachers and pupils contributing to this. I think that doesn't actually matter.
Yep, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's if you go with the complete concept of flipped learning, a student is very much part of the process too. What do they want to know? And what they have learned, if they can pass that on, then they certainly are solidifying what they've learned. If they're welcome to create resources too, if that's the angle, definitely.
I think so. Thank you very much for organising this, Darryl. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for those who managed to make their way through the video. We did have a few audio problems at the beginning, and I did message in the window there. I think I blamed Google Maps there, because as it was loading, it might have sucked up some of the bandwidth while Ian was trying to show us where he came from in Scotland. So thanks for your patience as you got through that. Things definitely improved. I'll work hard to try and get this video published, and it will be added to the original blog post announcing the webinar, so you'll be able to view that there and share it with others too. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll catch up again. The next webinar, I did try and put in a plug there. Appropriate topic. That's displaying on the screen. An idea for the next topic to cover, it might be in a month or two's time, we'll see. But how to use OneNote as an interactive whiteboard. I know this is one of Ian's favourites, but we'll get some other suggestions too from people about how they're using OneNote with projectors and what things work quite well within a classroom to try and get rid of the whiteboard in a sense and get everyone connected to a notebook. So that's what we're aiming at next time. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be in touch.